For the purposes of this content, best shall be defined as most preferred by Pater Franson when compared to a limited sample of alternatives. Well, we've just made it through an entire decade, and so since I was enjoying hearing what so many others thought of the decade in terms of entertainment in movies, I wanted to create a video to put my own thoughts out there on what, for me, were the best movie experiences of the last decade, which is the 2010s or 2010s or I don't know what exactly we call it, but here we go in no particular order, my choice for best movies of the last decade. First up, The Book of Eli. Grim post-apocalypse that makes me want to shower after looking at it and watching Gary Oldman's performance. Wow, I mean, that was just like greasy and nasty, and he was a great villain in that. It features this humble hero who is also brutally effective in combat. It's a movie that also shockingly spotlights the unique influence and value of the Bible. It has gripping and shocking action, characters to care about, and a powerful and surprising theme. It's a unique and very special Hollywood movie. Next up, Defendor. This is the story of a mentally handicapped man who is driven to fight crime on the streets as a superhero. This is, I think, is the most realistic superhero movie I have ever seen, bar none. And also, one of the most moving, as a loving and noble heart in the main character Defendor unwaveringly stands against hideous injustices, very like dark real-world injustices that most others have become numb to. It's emotional, it's sometimes funny, it's got a dark and heavy story, placing a vision for something better in the middle of very realistic human depravity. When so many in our world have become jaded, I think this movie presents a hero who refuses to let the world settle for its broken status quo. Next up, Kick-Ass. Now, this is not one I recommend to most Christians, especially given two brief instances of sexual content that hurt the movie for me, but the rest of this movie works so well for me that I have to include it on this list. Although it's a satirical deconstruction of superheroes, it still has great villains and heroes that were combinations of flawed and noble and funny and amazing to see in action. It's a dark and brutal world reflecting our own in many ways, but it also has fun, subverting expectations while also delivering, wow, one of the most powerfully dramatic scenes I've ever watched in a superhero movie. Next up, Sucker Punch. A psychologist helps girls in an asylum cope with their situations by empowering them to retreat into these imagined worlds that they create in their minds, in which they are powerful and able to bring about positive change in those imaginary circumstances, which eventually leads to them bringing positive change into their real world circumstances. The tragic reality of the girl's situation is powerfully moving to me at times, and the internal mental world sequences have some of the most spectacular and imaginative environments and action sequences I've ever seen on film. This is that rare and awesome kind of movie that gives me unleashed nerd spectacle married to deeply moving drama with a ton of fun action along the way. The Thing. Now, this is not John Carpenter's The Thing from the 80s, but this is the modern prequel to that original classic, featuring my favorite movie monster of all time. Like the original, it doesn't rest on its disturbingly exotic gore monster, but also delivers a solid paranoia story, which is, I think, what helps the original movie age so gracefully. Monsters do not get any better than The Thing in my book. And this is a great movie about the world's best monster. Now, how about we cap this thing off with a trilogy, huh? Please, will somebody take care of that for me? Prometheus is a pseudo-prequel to the Alien franchise that explores the space seeding hypothesis for human origins that's been floated around in science fiction and unfortunately even in like real conversation for years, with healthy doses of grotesque alien body horror and interesting characters that are portrayed through really great performances, I thought. And it's got this amazing highly thought-provoking, intense, and thrilling experience to it. I mean, the whole way through. I mean, it was just really, really had me on the edge of my seat, space horror thrills, and moments that both intentionally and unintentionally, I think, create opportunity for worthwhile thought about humanity and the relationship between faith and reason. Next up, Man of Steel. This is a great sci-fi movie in addition to introducing the world's first superhero. Although Man of Steel is rich with weighty emotions and decisions, it's also a well-paced, spectacular thrill ride with explosive effects that not only widened my eyes, but really kind of pierced my heart as they effectively serve to tell a dramatically intense story. This story gives us a relatable Superman, a relatable Kent family who admirably love each other deeply and have the heart and drive to do the right thing, but like many of us, still struggle in the midst of making those choices to know exactly what the right thing is and then to follow through to make that right choice in the end. It also touches nicely on some of the Christ metaphors that have become associated with Superman over the years. It delivers dramatic heart, an awesome sci-fi spectacle, and is nearly my favorite superhero movie of all time. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 took the grounded drama that was aimed for in the first movie and added well-motivated characters and much more high-flying, web-slinging action as well as devastating drama in this movie. Not the success financially that Sony wanted, and so they canceled this series and let Marvel Studios take over the character after this movie. But this movie brings at least that classic Gwen Stacy Spider-Man arc to a close, leaving us with what I think is a short, satisfying, self-contained two-film series that dares to go to some of the heavier, tragic places in the history of Spider-Man stories, while also serving up great action and spectacle. Mad Max Fury Road. Wow. This is a richly developed post-apocalyptic world that asks its audience to kind of do without exposition and instead just absorb, take in this world, take in these pure characters as they're being portrayed, and take in the culture as it's being implied, amidst almost non-stop spectacle and largely practical action. Almost the entire movie is one giant car chase with crazy tactics and explosive vehicle-mounted weapons. It's a tragic world that my head worked to understand while my heart was easily investing in the main characters. It's also a great springboard, I think, for thought and conversation about where we find our identity. If you haven't thought about that, watch this movie again and think about what all these people, these various characters are striving, how they're striving to define themselves. And there's, spectacular action, such a large scale for so much of this movie. It's just oh my gosh, this is not just a movie for me, it's really a unique and intense experience, just dialed up to 11. Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice. Now, this is a very divisive movie, or divisive. In fact, those who have explained to me why they dislike it, usually referring to the Martha meme, come across as though they watched an entirely different movie from me, including their negative reaction to that Martha moment, a scene that I actually loved. I even created a video trying to answer the question, who will like Batman versus Superman? Now, you may not like it, that's totally fine, although I wish everyone could enjoy this movie as much as I do. For me, it is the epitome of spectacle meets drama among superhero movies. I have never felt equally moved by emotion and equally blown away by spectacle to the degree I felt watching this movie. It also progresses the Christ metaphors begun in Man of Steel in a way I found very moving. Is there anything I would change? Well, I do have some issues with their version of Lex Luthor, but they don't remotely interfere with my enjoyment of all the elements that to this day add up to what is my favorite superhero movie of all time. All right, Logan. We see a world-weary Wolverine traveling cross-country with an infirm 90-year-old Professor Xavier to help a girl that's on the run and that Logan is somehow connected to. It's a story that represents sort of the tail end of the Fox X-Men movie universe, and it brings it all to a close in a somber, emotional way with bittersweet hopefulness. It's really mixed emotions for me as I watch this, and especially the ending. And while the action only comes in bursts, with plenty of space taken for very welcome, dramatic, quietly dramatic scenes. Wolverine in those action scenes is more brutal than ever, and for understandable reasons. It's not just violence and gore for the sake of violence and gore. He's both emotionally and physically exhausted, and he can't afford to pull his punches anymore. A very Die-Hard kind of vibe and some great dramatic beats. Really, really enjoyed Logan. Wonder Woman. Okay, I had my doubts about Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman outside of the direction of Zack Snyder. I was like, how's she going to do in her own movie under a different director? But this movie put those fears to rest and then set the gold standard in my mind for what a female-led superhero movie can be. And it did that through a striking juxtapositioning of contrasting elements. Wonder Woman is a strong warrior, but also soft and compassionate. There are frequent character-driven jokes throughout the movie, but also the darkness and weight of the World War I setting and humanity's brokenness were very present throughout. There are touching character moments and plenty of visual spectacle, both at the same time. The story even affirms both the tragic brokenness of humanity and the immense value of each human, as Diana surprisingly becomes something of a Christ figure in a way I found moving and meaningful. So far, the first female superhero has the best female superhero movie for me by a mile. Many will see Black Panther as groundbreaking because it features an African superhero and cast. I loved it because it mashed together future tech and ancient culture, African music and urban American music. It also had family relational drama with crazy cool action and visuals. So it was mashed together all these elements that you usually just get one or the other in a lot of these kinds of movies. And I love that. It also featured a villain that, while not excusable, still to me felt pitiable, with an interesting motive and arc resolution. Like many other movies on this list, Black Panther mixes human drama with massive geek appeal and draws on aesthetic inspirations that really felt fresh and original. Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, they share a slot here. The original Avengers movie almost made this list, and it still gets an honorary mention here, but while that movie was the culmination of multiple solo superhero movies, Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame are the culmination of over 10 years of superhero movies sharing a single cinematic continuity. This is like, just from film history, this is a big blip on the radar of film history. I felt ho-hum about a lot of those Marvel movies, but the Russo brothers brought that blend of both crazy nerd spectacle and grounded human drama that I chase after in movies, if you couldn't tell from listening to my thoughts on this list. For both the great quality of the experience and its undeniable groundbreaking nature, Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame share this slot on my list. And finally, Upgrade. This movie mixes the genres of superhero, revenge flick, horror, science fiction. They stick them in a blender and then throw your expectations out the window. This relatively small budget movie is a blend of all those things with some much appreciated weighty human drama. The fight scenes are brutal and both choreographed and shot in very creative ways that took me by surprise and just kind of delighted me to watch. Had my eyes wide, popping open through many sequences of this movie. And this is a movie that I will be eagerly introducing friends to for years. It's kind of like the cool movie that you've probably never seen. And if any of that sounds good to you, I highly recommend you check it out. All right, that's my list. But my tastes, I'm sure, are very different from yours, so I would love to get your thoughts below on what you would put on a list like this for the last decade of movies. And then, of course, I hope you'll join us soon over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. We've got a ton going on here at Spirit Blade Productions and Christian Geek Central, including our in-depth Bible study for geeks, movie, game, and other entertainment reviews or commentary, live streams, Christian geek news, original audio dramas, and tons more. And on top of all that, you can become a Spirit Blade insider with an influential voice and get access to exclusive content and rewards. It's your involvement as a patron that will keep all of this going and growing. So I want to thank you for your consideration in that. For more information, please check out our Patreon page through the link below at patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. Thanks for listening.